Imagine standing in a field at noon, the sun high and bright in the sky, a warm breeze on your face. Suddenly, the birds stop singing. A strange silence falls. On the horizon, something impossible is happening. A wall, a solid black mountain, is rising. It's not a storm cloud. It's not smoke from some distant fire. It's the earth itself, the very topsoil of America, taking flight. This isn't a scene from a disaster movie. This was the terrifying reality for millions of Americans in the 1930s. They called it the Dust Bowl, and it was a man-made catastrophe that turned the American dream into a suffocating nightmare. For a decade, the heartland of the United States was choked by what they called black blizzards. These weren't just dust storms. They were apocalyptic events. Picture this. A wall of dirt, sometimes miles wide and reaching up to 8,000 feet into the sky, rolling across the plains at speeds of 60 miles per hour or more. It would hit a town and turn midday into midnight. A complete, terrifying, and absolute darkness. So thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. Inside homes, families huddled together, stuffing wet rags into every crack and crevice of their doors and windows. But it was no use. The fine, powdery dust seeped through everything, coating food, water, furniture, and even the very air they breathed. How did this happen? It was a perfect storm of human ambition and natural disaster. In the early 20th century, a wave of settlers rushed to the southern plains, lured by the promise of cheap land and a new start. The government encouraged them, calling it the last frontier of American agriculture. Armed with new technology like tractors and steel plows, they tore up millions of acres of native prairie grass. This grass had deep roots that held the soil in place for centuries, protecting it from the region's notoriously strong winds. For a few years, everything was great. Bumper crops of wheat made farmers rich. They called the region the breadbasket of the world. But they had unknowingly stripped the land of its natural armor. Then came the drought. Starting in 1930, the rains simply stopped. The once fertile soil, now exposed and pulverized by years of aggressive farming, tornade to dust. The relentless prairie winds, which had always been a feature of the landscape, now had nothing to hold the soil down. They picked it up and hurled it across the country. The scale is almost unimaginable. In a single storm on May 9, 1934, an estimated 350 million tons of topsoil from the Great Plains was blown all the way to the East Coast. Dust from Oklahoma and Kansas fell like snow on Chicago. It clouded the skies over New York City and Washington, D.C., and ships 300 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean reported a fine layer of dust on their decks. The very land was literally blowing away. Life in the Dust Bowl became a daily struggle for survival. The dust caused a terrifying illness called dust pneumonia. People, especially children and the elderly, would inhale the fine, silica-filled particles, which would turn to mud in their lungs. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Many died, slowly suffocating. Livestock choked to death in the fields, their stomachs found to be full of sand. Farmers watched in despair as their crops were either sand-blasted into oblivion or buried under massive drifts of dust that looked like desert dunes. Some dunes were so large they buried entire barns, fences, and even houses. Imagine waking up to find you can't open your front door because a 20-foot drift of soil is piled against it. The economic devastation was total. With their crops gone and their land worthless, farmers couldn't pay their mortgages. Banks foreclosed, and families who had poured their life savings and sweat into their land were left with nothing. They became migrants in their own country. This was the era of the Okies, a term often used contemptuously for these displaced families, even though they came from many states like Kansas, Texas, and Colorado. Not just Oklahoma, they packed what little they had left into dilapidated cars and trucks and headed west, chasing a rumor of jobs and a better life in California. Their journey was immortalized in John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. They traveled along Route 66, which became a river of human misery. They were often met with hostility. Californians, struggling with their own economic problems during the Great Depression, saw the migrants as a burden. Te were kaded, dome Okies, and signs appeared that read nitrogen monoxide jobs for Okies. They lived in squalid roadside camps, desperate for any work they could find, often for starvation wages, picking fruit or cotton. They had fled one nightmare, only to find themselves in another, stripped of their homes, their livelihoods, and their dignity. In total, about 2.5 million people left the Dust Bowl states during the 1930s, the largest migration in American history in such a short period. But in the face of this apocalypse, there was also incredible resilience. People learned to adapt. They created makeshift masks from cloth. They stretched cheesecloth over their windows. They developed a dark humor about their situation, joking about how they had to shake the dirt out of their coffee before drinking it. And there were those who refused to leave. They believed in the land, and they were determined to hold on. The government finally stepped in. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, new programs were created to fight the disaster. The Soil Conservation Service was established in 1935, teaching farmers new techniques like contour plowing, terracing, and crop rotation to protect the soil. The government also launched one of the most ambitious environmental projects in history, the Great Plains Shelter Belt. The plan was to plant a massive wall of trees, 100 miles wide, stretching from Canada all the way down to Texas, to act as a windbreak. Over the next decade, workers planted more than 220 million trees. It was a monumental effort that helped to slowly heal the land. Finally, in the fall of 1939, the rains returned. The drought that had held the plains in its grip for nearly a decade was broken. Slowly, life began to seep back into the land. The grass began to grow again, and the fields, once barren and desolate, could once more be farmed, this time with a newfound respect for the forces of nature. The Dust Bowl serves as a powerful and humbling lesson. It shows us how quickly our environment can turn against us when we push it too far. A story of climate change driven not by industrial emissions, but by a misunderstanding of ecology. It's a reminder that the Earth is not something to be conquered, but a complex system that we are a part of. The dust storms of the 1930s have settled, but the story of the people who endured them, their courage, their suffering, and their incredible will to survive remains a vital part of the American story. It's a testament to the human spirit and a cautionary tale that we should never forget. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as powerful as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video. Have you ever imagined what it felt like to stand at the dawn of a new era, with endless fields of gold stretching out before you, promising a future brighter than ever before? Let's take a journey back in time, to the heartland of America in the Roaring '20s. This wasn't just an age of jazz and flappers. It was a time of incredible optimism, a deep-seated belief that anything was possible, and nowhere was this feeling more alive than in the vast, rolling plains of the American countryside. These were the pioneers, the iron workhorses that revolutionized farming. Imagine the sight of a vintage tractor, painted in bold, cheerful colors like cherry red or forest green, its sturdy metal frame gleaming in the morning sun. These weren't sleek, computerized machines. They were marvels of engineering for their time, built with grit, steel, and a whole lot of heart. You can almost hear the rhythmic chug-chug of the engine as it comes to life, a steady, powerful sound that echoed across the plains. It's a sound of progress, of power being harnessed to tame the land and unlock its potential. Watching one of these vintage machines at work is like watching a piece of history in motion. The large, cleated steel wheels grip the soil, turning it over, preparing the ground for a new season of growth. Every puff of smoke from the exhaust pipe tells a story of human ingenuity and our timeless partnership with the land. The 1920s were fueled by this powerful sense of forward momentum. After the turmoil of the Great War, there was a collective sigh of relief and a surge of energy. People believed in progress, in building a better world for their children. This optimism wasn't just a feeling. It was visible in the art, the architecture, and especially in the advertisements of the time. Everything was bright, bold, and full of life. The colors were warm and inviting, sunny yellows, deep blues, and rich, earthy browns, all working together to paint a picture of prosperity and boundless opportunity. Think about the farmer from that era. He'd stand tall, looking out over his fields, his face weathered by the sun and wind, but his eyes shining with pride and hope. He wasn't just growing wheat. He was building a legacy. He was part of a grand American story, a story of taming the wilderness, of turning vast, untamed lands into productive, life-sustaining farms. It was a physical, demanding life, but it was also a deeply rewarding one. Every sunrise brought a new challenge, and every sunset brought the satisfaction of a day's work well done. This connection to the land was profound. It was a partnership based on respect and understanding. Farmers knew the cycles of the seasons, the feel of the soil, the signs of coming rain. They worked with nature, not against it, and the land, in return, provided. It gave them their livelihood, their food, and a deep sense of purpose. This symbiotic relationship is something that, in our fast-paced modern world, we can sometimes forget. But back, Tinit was the very foundation of life. Let's talk more about these magnificent machines. The tractors of the 1920s were a symbol of this new age of mechanical power. Brands like Fordson, John Deere, and Farmel were becoming household names. They were designed to be tough, reliable, and simple enough for a farmer to maintain and repair on his own. Owning a tractor meant you could cultivate more land, more efficiently than ever before. It was a game changer, freeing families from some of the back-breaking labor that had defined farming for centuries. Imagine a young boy watching his father drive the new tractor for the first time. The noise, the power, the sheer size of it must have been on. It was a symbol of the future, a promise that his life might be different, perhaps a little easier than his grandfather's. These machines weren't just tools, they were objects of fascination and pride, lovingly cared for and passed down through generations. Even today, seeing a restored 1920s tractor at a county fair evokes a powerful sense of nostalgia and admiration for the craftsmanship and durability of that era. The aesthetic of 1920s Americana is so distinct and appealing. It's clean, optimistic, and full of confidence. The illustrations on seed packets, the logos on farm equipment, the posters promoting agricultural fairs, they all shared this bright, can-do spirit. The art style often featured strong lines, vibrant colors, and idealized images of farm life. A happy family, a bountiful harvest, a sturdy barn against a clear blue sky. These weren't just marketing. They were reflections of a deeply held belief in the American dream. This dream was rooted in the soil. It was the idea that, with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anyone could build a successful life. The endless fields of wheat weren't just a source of food. They were a symbol of this limitless potential. Each stalk of wheat represented a small piece of that dream, growing and multiplying into a vast harvest of prosperity. As the day wears on in our 1920s landscape, the sun climbs higher in the sky. The work is hard, but there's a sense of community that makes it all worthwhile. Neighbors would help each other out during planting and harvest seasons, sharing equipment, labor, and stories. The local town was the hub of this community, a place to buy supplies, sell produce, and catch up on the latest news. It was a world built on relationships, on knowing your neighbors, and lending a hand when needed. As evening approaches, the tractor's work is done for the day. The engine sputters to a stop, and a peaceful silence descends upon the fields, broken only by the chirping of crickets. The sky transforms into a breathtaking canvas of oranges, pinks, and purples. The farmer, tired but content, heads home for a well-deserved meal with his family. The farmhouse, with its warm lights glowing in the twilight, is a sanctuary, a symbol of everything he works for. This idealized vision of 1920s rural America is powerful because it speaks to something deep within us, a longing for a simpler time, a closer connection to the earth, and a belief in a bright future. It reminds us of the values that built a nation: hard work, resilience, community, and an unshakable sense of optimism. So the next time you see a white open field, or maybe even a vintage tractor at a museum, take a moment. Try to imagine that bygone era. Hear the chug of the engine, feel the warmth of the sun, and breathe in the spirit of 1920s Americana. It's a story written in the soil, a story of hope and harvest that continues to inspire us to this day. It's a reminder that no matter how complex our world becomes, the simple, powerful beauty of a field of wheat stretching to the horizon will always hold a special kind of magic. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey back in time. I hope you enjoyed this glimpse into a truly remarkable era. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one. Ever wonder how the vast, rolling prairies of North America, once covered in a sea of native buffalo grass, became the breadbasket of the world? It wasn't a gentle process, it was a revolution. An industrial revolution played out on the fields. And it all started with a machine that would forever change the face of the land. The tractor. Imagine this scene. Not one, not 10, but hundreds of tractors, lined up like an army, their engines rumbling in a symphony of raw power. In front of them, an endless expanse of virgin prairie, land that had remained untouched for millennia, home to bison and covered in deep-rooted buffalo grass. Then, with a roar that shakes the very ground, they move forward. Steel plows, sharp and unyielding, bite into the earth. The ancient sod, a complex web of roots and soil built up over centuries, is sliced open, flipped, and torn apart. The native buffalo grass, which had held this soil together against wind and rain, is ripped from its hold. Behind this mechanical onslaught, a massive cloud of dust billows into the sky, a brown-gray plume that can be seen for miles. A testament to the sheer scale of this transformation. This was more than just farming. This was conquest. This was the belief that nature could be, and so be tamed and redesigned for human purpose. The early 20th century was an era of unbridled optimism and technology. The tractor was its icon on the farm. It replaced the slow, steady power of draft animals with the relentless, untiring force of the internal combustion engine. One tractor could do the work of many horses, and do it faster. This mechanization allowed for an unprecedented expansion of agriculture. Land that was once considered too difficult to cultivate was suddenly accessible. Settlers, armed with these new machines, poured into the Great Plains, driven by the promise of prosperity and the government's encouragement to plow the plains and feed a growing nation. They were pioneers of a new age, convinced they were improving the land, making it productive, bringing civilization to the wilderness. The scale was staggering. We're talking about millions of acres turned over in just a few decades. The landscape was fundamentally re-engineered. The gentle, undulating hills of grass were replaced by a grid of perfectly straight furrows, stretching to the horizon. It was a visual representation of order imposed upon wildness, a triumph of human ingenuity. But this triumph had a hidden cost. The very thing that made the prairie ecosystem so resilient to dense, tangled root system of the native grasses was destroyed. This root system acted like a living anchor, holding the topsoil in place. It had evolved over thousands of years to withstand the region's harsh climate, its droughts, and its powerful winds. When the plows came, they broke that anchor. The rich topsoil, now exposed and pulverized, was left vulnerable. For a few years, with favorable rains, the harvests were bountiful. Wheat fields, green and gold, replaced the muted tones of the prairie. It seemed like a miracle, a testament to the power of modern agriculture. The boom was on, and fortunes were made. Farmers invested in more land, bigger tractors, and went deeper into debt, confident that the good times would last forever. Then, the rain stopped. The 1930s brought a decade of severe drought, something the plains had experienced before. But this time was different. Without the protective cover of the native grasses, the soil began to move. The relentless winds that sweep across the plains, once a natural part of the environment, became a destructive force. It started slowly, with small dust storms, but soon they grew into monstrous black blizzards. These weren't just clouds of dust. They were rolling walls of earth, thousands of feet high, that blotted out the sun and turned day into night. The sky, a brilliant prairie blue, turned a terrifying, choking brown. The fine topsoil, the very lifeblood of the farms, was lifted into the air and carried hundreds, even thousands of miles away, sometimes dusting ships in the Atlantic Ocean. This was the Dust Bowl. The Industrial Revolution on the fields had backfired in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The land that was supposed to be a source of endless prosperity became a source of despair. Farms were buried, livestock suffocated, and people fell ill with dust pneumonia. The dream of the mechanized prairie had turned into a nightmare. Families who had poured their lives into the land were forced to abandon everything and migrate, becoming ecological refugees in their own country. The story of the tractor and the plowing of the plains is a powerful lesson. It's a story of ambition, innovation, and the immense power of technology to reshape our world. But it's also a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of our actions and the importance of understanding the delicate balance of the ecosystems we inhabit. The Dust Bowl forced a reckoning. It led to the birth of the soil conservation movement and a new respect for the land. We learned the hard way that working with nature, rather than simply trying to conquer it, is the key to long-term survival and prosperity. Techniques like contour plowing, terracing, and allowing fields to lie fallow were introduced to heal the wounded earth. Today, as we face new environmental challenges, the image of those tractors tearing up the buffalo grass serves as a stark reminder. It reminds us that our relationship with the planet is a complex one. The drive to innovate and improve is part of who we are, but it must be tempered with wisdom, foresight, and a deep respect for the natural systems that sustain us all. The dust-filled skies of the 1930s taught us a lesson that we can never afford to forget. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into our history, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. Imagine a world painted in shades of brown and ochre. The ground beneath your feet, a mosaic of deep, jagged cracks, a puzzle put together by a relentless sun. This isn't some distant, alien planet. This is a possible future for our own Earth. A future we're seeing glimpses of more and more often. Look closer at this landscape. The Earth is so dry, it seems to sigh dust with every gust of wind. It's thirsty, parched beyond recognition. This isn't just soil. It's a testament to a long, forgotten rain. Standing defiant against the vast, empty sky is a single tree. Its branches, skeletal and silvered, reach out like desperate fingers, pleading for a drop of moisture that will never come. There are no leaves to rustle in the breeze, no shade to offer respite from the blistering heat. It's a monument to what once was, a ghost of a forest, a sentinel watching over a dying land. This tree once pulsed with life. It was a home for birds, its roots a complex network that held the soil together, a vital part of a thriving ecosystem. Now, it's a stark reminder of what we stand to lose. As your eyes scan the horizon, the air itself seems to move. It's not a gentle breeze. It's the shimmer of heat waves, distorting the world, making the distance tremble. It's like looking through a pane of warped glass. This intense visible heat is the silent engine of this desolation. It bakes the ground, drains the life from every living thing, and turns the very air into a suffocating blanket. This isn't just a hot day. It's a permanent state of being, a fever that the earth can't seem to break. The atmosphere itself feels heavy, exhausted. This scene, as stark as it is, isn't just a work of imagination. It's a reality in many parts of our world. We see it in news reports from regions battling historic droughts, in photographs of once mighty rivers reduced to trickles, and in the stories of farmers whose fields have turned to dust. This isn't just about a lack of water. It's a chain reaction. When the water disappears, the plants die. When the plants die, the soil erodes, blowing away in the wind, leaving behind a barren wasteland. The animals that depended on that ecosystem either leave or perish. What causes such a profound transformation? The story is complex, but a major character is our changing climate. As global temperatures rise, weather patterns are disrupted. Areas that once had reliable rainfall now face prolonged periods of drought. The heat accelerates evaporation, pulling moisture from the soil and from reservoirs faster than it can be replenished. It's a vicious cycle. The drier the land gets, the hotter it becomes, which in turn makes it even drier. But it's not just about what's happening in the sky. Our actions on the ground play a massive role too. Deforestation, for example. Trees are natural climate regulators. They draw water from the ground and release it into the atmosphere, a process called transpiration, which helps to create clouds and rain. When we cut down forests, we break this vital water cycle, effectively turning off the rain machine for that region. Reforestation and afforestation, planting trees where they've been lost and where they have grown before, are some of the most powerful tools we have. Trees are the anchors of a healthy ecosystem. Their roots hold the soil, preventing erosion. Their canopy provides shade, cooling the ground and creating a microclimate that allows other plants to grow. They are, quite literally, imagine this same field, years from now, dotted with young, resilient saplings. Their green leaves a vibrant contrast to the memory of the cracked earth. We also need to rethink how we farm. Regenerative agriculture is a philosophy that works with nature, not against it. It focuses on building healthy soil that is rich in organic matter, teeming with microbial life. Healthy soil acts like a sponge, soaking up water during rains and holding onto it for plants to use during dry periods. Techniques like cover cropping, no-till farming, and composting can transform degraded land back into fertile ground. It's about giving back to the earth as much as we take from it. And of course, we must tackle the root cause, climate change. This means transitioning to clean, renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, reducing our carbon footprint, and advocating for policies that support a sustainable future. Every action, no matter how small it seems, contributes to a larger shift. Choosing to walk or bike instead of drive, reducing waste, supporting businesses with sustainable practices. It all adds up. This journey from a parched desert back to a thriving ecosystem is not a quick or easy one. It requires patience, persistence, and collaboration. It requires governments to enact bold policies, corporations to innovate responsibly, and individuals to make conscious choices every single day. But the potential reward is immeasurable. It's the sound of buzzing insects returning, the sight of wildflowers blooming after a rain, the feeling of cool shade under a growing tree. A picture of hope, of restoration, of humanity working in harmony with nature. Let this image be the before shot in a story of incredible transformation. The after shot is up to us to create. Let's get to work. Thanks for watching, and if you found this message important, please share it and subscribe for more content on how we can build a better world together. The year is 1935. The American dream feels like a distant memory, buried under tons of dust. For families across the Great Plains, life has become a relentless battle for survival. This isn't just a story from a history book. It's the raw, unfiltered reality of the Dust Bowl. Imagine waking up not to the sun, but to a sky turned black by a rolling wall of dirt so thick it suffocates the light. They called them black blizzards, and they were terrifying. These weren't just dust storms, they were ecological catastrophes. The winds would howl for days, stripping the topsoil from millions of acres of farmland. This was land that had been overplowed, stripped of its native grasses that once held the earth in place. Now, there was nothing to stop the soil from taking flight. The dust was fine as flour and got into everything. It seeped through cracks in the walls, under doors, through windows sealed with tape and wet rags. It coated your food, your water, your clothes. You could feel the grit between your teeth with every meal. Every day was a struggle against the elements. Farmers, who once proudly worked their land, watched in despair as their crops withered and died. Buried under drifts of dust that could swallow entire fences, farm equipment, and even small buildings, the air became thick with static electricity. So much so that you could see blue sparks jumping between objects, even people. Shaking someone's hand could give you a painful jolt. Barbed wire fences would glow with an eerie blue light, a phenomenon they called St. Elmo's fire, a ghostly warning in the desolate landscape. Livestock perished, either suffocating from the dust-filled air or starving because their grazing lands were gone. The economic toll was devastating. With no crops to sell, farmers couldn't pay their mortgages. Banks foreclosed, and families who had worked the land for generations were forced to leave everything behind. Their homes, their memories, their entire lives, all packed into a rickety truck, if they were lucky enough to have one. But the most insidious threat was to their health. The dust wasn't just dirt, it was a lethal cocktail of fine soil, fertilizers, and pesticides. Breathing it in day after day led to a terrifying new illness: dust pneumonia. Hospitals and makeshift clinics were overwhelmed. Doctors saw countless patients, especially children and the elderly, with lungs so clogged with mud they were essentially suffocating from the inside out. In dimly lit cabins, mothers would hold their coughing children, wiping their faces with damp cloths, praying for a clean breath of air that never came. The wheezing coughs became a constant, heartbreaking soundtrack to the era. In the face of this apocalypse, what do? You fight. You adapt. You endure. People got creative out of sheer necessity. They would hang wet sheets over windows and doorways to try and catch the dust. They fashioned makeshift masks from cloth and war goggles to protect their eyes whenever they ventured outside. They learned to tell by the color of the sky how bad a storm was going to be. Yellow meant a mild one. Dark brown was bad, and black meant run for cover immediately. Community became a lifeline. Neighbors helped each other, sharing what little food and water they had. They held storm socials in community halls, trying to find a moment of normalcy and human connection amidst the chaos, singing and dancing to forget the wind howling outside. The resilience of the human spirit in the face of such overwhelming odds is truly incredible. They were tough, resourceful people, and they refused to be broken. The government eventually stepped in with the New Deal. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps planted millions of trees to create windbreaks that would help hold the soil down. The Soil Conservation Service taught farmers new techniques like crop rotation and contour plowing to prevent erosion. It was a monumental effort, a nation learning a hard lesson about respecting the land. Slowly, very slowly, the land began to heal. But for hundreds of thousands of people, the only option was to leave. They became migrants, heading west to California, chasing a rumor of jobs and a better life. They were nicknamed Okies, a term often used with disdain. Even though they came from Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and all over the plains, they were American refugees in their own country, met with suspicion and hostility. Their journey was famously chronicled by John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath, a story that put a human face on this national tragedy. The Dust Bowl is a powerful reminder of how fragile our environment is and how quickly things can go wrong when we do UN take care of it. It's a story of ecological collapse, but it's also a story of incredible human strength, of people who face the unimaginable and refuse to give up hope. Their legacy isn't just in the history books. It's written in the very soil of the Great Plains and in the resilient spirit of the communities that survived. It teaches us the importance of foresight, conservation, and above all, the enduring power of hope in the darkest of times. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as powerful as I did, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. See you next time. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, but then a low hum started to build in the distance. It wasn't the sound of machinery or traffic. It was something alive, and it was getting closer. What you're about to see is not a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster, but a real-life event that unfolded in a quiet neighborhood, turning a peaceful afternoon into something straight out of a horror film. This is the story of the day the swarm came, an invasion of biblical proportions that defied belief. Look at this footage. It starts innocently enough. A few grasshoppers, maybe a dozen, land on a wooden fence. You might think, oh, that's interesting, and go about your day. But this was just the beginning. The scout party for an army of millions. Within minutes, the sky began to darken. Not from clouds, but from a living, breathing mass of insects. A colossal swarm of grasshoppers descended, a writhing, clicking tsunami that blotted out the sun. The sheer number is impossible to comprehend. They weren't just passing through, they were hungry, and their target was this single, ordinary wooden fence. The scene transformed into pure chaos. The air, thick with the sound of millions of tiny jaws, became a deafening chorus of destruction. Imagine the sound of a million tiny chainsaws all firing up at once. That's what residents described. The grasshoppers carpeted every surface. The ground, the trees, the houses, and most terrifyingly, the fence. It was no longer a wooden fence. It was a living, moving entity, a pulsating wall of green and brown bodies. They were relentless, a single-minded force of nature with an insatiable appetite. You can see them here, climbing over each other. A layered, seething mass, all fixated on one goal. To divide. Now, let's get closer. This is where it gets truly unsettling. Look at the detail. Each grasshopper is a perfect eating machine. Their mandibles, designed for shredding plant matter, were now working in unison on the solid wood of the fence. You can literally see the wood disappearing. Splinters and dusts rained down as they chew through the planks. It's like watching a time-lapse of decay, but it's happening in real time. The fence, which had stood for years, was being unmade, deconstructed molecule by molecule, by this overwhelming force. The speed is what's so shocking. Planks that were solid just moments before now have holes. Then they become latticework, and then they're just gone. Many people don't realize that certain species of grasshoppers, especially during a swarm event known as a plague, can and do eat wood. While they primarily feed on green vegetation, when their numbers reach these astronomical levels, competition for food becomes so intense that their diet expands dramatically. They'll eat crops, leaves, stems, and yes, even the cellulose in wood, paper, and fabrics. This isn't just random biting, it's a survival-driven feeding frenzy. The sheer pressure of the swarm drives them to consume anything and everything in their path. What we're witnessing is a biological phenomenon pushed to its absolute extreme. The psychological impact on the people who filmed this was profound. They described feeling trapped, watching helplessly as their property was literally consumed. The swarm blocked out the light, casting an eerie, apocalyptic twilight over the entire area. The constant, overwhelmed sound, the sight of the writhing mass. It was a sensory overload that felt like a nightmare come to life. Some have compared it to classic horror movies like The Birds, but this was real. There was no director to yell cut. This was nature, in its most raw and terrifying form, reminding us of its immense and sometimes frightening power. Think about the scale of this. We're talking about millions, possibly tens of millions, of individual insects. The combined weight of a swarm this size can be measured in tons. It's a mobile ecosystem of hunger. These plagues are often triggered by specific environmental conditions, like a period of drought followed by rapid vegetation growth after rainfall. This creates the perfect breeding ground, leading to a population explosion. Once they reach a certain density, their behavior changes. They become gregarious, forming these massive, migratory swarms that can travel hundreds of miles, consuming everything in their wake. What we see here is just a snapshot, a single moment in the devastating journey of this particular swarm. Look how the fence is buckling under the sheer weight of the insects before it has even fully eaten. The structural integrity is gone. It is a powerful illustration of how a multitude of small forces can combine to overcome something much larger and seemingly stronger. It's a principle we see in nature all the time, but rarely this dramatically. The insects show no signs of stopping. They eat until there is nothing left to eat, and then they move on, a rolling wave of consumption, searching for its next meal. The fence is just an appetizer. Imagine this swarm descending on acres of farmland. The economic and agricultural devastation would be catastrophic. As the day wore on, the fence continued to vanish. Post by post, rail by rail, it was a methodical, yet chaotic, demolition. You can see the ground below is littered with a thick layer of wood dust and insect droppings, a grim testament to the feast that had taken place. By the time the sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows, the swarms started to recede. Their energy spent, or perhaps the lights signaling them to settle for the night, they began to disperse. The deafening noise subsided, replaced by an unnerving silence. And this is what was left. Not a fence, but a ghost of one. A few splintered posts, chewed down stubs sticking out of the ground. The rest was just gone, erased from the landscape. It's a stark and powerful image, a testament to the incredible and sometimes terrifying power of the natural world. This event serves as a humbling reminder that no matter how much we build and control our environment, we are still a small part of a much larger, wilder system. An entire fence, devoured in a single afternoon. It's a story that's hard to believe, but the evidence is right here. Thanks for watching this incredible footage with me. If you found this as mind-blowing as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next deep dive into the amazing and sometimes scary world around us. See you next time. Have you ever seen a photograph so powerful it feels like a memory? A picture that tells a story of 1,000 miles of desperation, but also of a stubborn, unyielding hope. Today, we're stepping back in time, onto a dusty, sun-baked road that stretches across the heart of America. We were looking at an image that could be pulled straight from the pages of Steinbeck. It's the grapes of wrath. Imagine this. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of tired orange and deep purple. The air is thick with dust, kicked up by the worn tires of an old Model T Ford. This isn't just a car, it's a lifeline. It's a mechanical beast of burden, groaning under a weight it was never designed to carry. Ropes, frayed and strained, lash down a precarious mountain of belongings. A rocking chair, its wood-weathered and gray, is tied upside down. A brass bed frame gleams dully in the fading light, a symbol of a home left behind. Mattresses are rolled and strapped to the running boards, their striped, ticking fabric stained with the grime of the road. Pots, pans, and buckets dangle from every possible perch, clanking a somber rhythm with every bump and rut in the road. This is the quintessential image of the Dust Bowl migration. In the 1930s, a perfect storm of severe drought and poor farming practices turned the Great Plains into a wasteland. Topsoil, once fertile and rich, became dust. It rose in monstrous, suffocating clouds, cold black blizzards that blotted out the sun and buried farms, homes, and livelihoods. Families who had worked the land for generations watched their world literally blow away. Banks foreclosed on their properties, leaving them with nothing but what they could carry and a desperate need to find a new beginning. Their destination? California. It was whispered about as a promised land, a place of lush valleys, endless sunshine, and jobs for the picking, literally, picking fruit in the orchards. The primary artery for this great westward exodus was US Route 66. It wasn't the smooth, superhighway we might imagine today. It was a patchwork of roads, some paved, many just graded dirt, winding its way from Chicago to Los Angeles. For these families, it became more than just a road. It was a symbol of their journey, a path of both hardship and hope. John Steinbeck famously called it the Mother Road, the road of flight. Now, look closer at the car. It's not just furniture piled on top. Tucked in between the chairs and bed springs are people, a family. You can just make out their silhouettes. A father behind the wheel, his face etched with worry, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His knuckles are probably white as he grips the steering wheel, willing this old machine to keep going just one more day, one more mile. Beside him, a mother, perhaps with a baby in her lap, her face a mask of exhaustion and resilience. Her gaze isn't on the road ahead, but on her children. And the children, they are crammed in wherever there's space. A young boy might be perched on a pile of blankets, his face streaked with dirt, looking out at the passing, desolate landscape with a child's wide-eyed curiosity, perhaps not fully grasping the gravity of their situation. An older sister might be trying to comfort a younger sibling, her own childhood put on hold by the urgent need to survive. These aren't just anonymous figures. They are the Jodes from the Grapes of Wrath. They are every family that made this arduous journey. They carry not just their physical possessions, but the ghosts of the lives they left behind, and the fragile seed of a dream for a better future. Think about the sheer logistics of this journey. A Model T, in its prime, might get 20 miles to the gallon and top out at 40 miles per hour on a good day. But this one, overloaded, running on bad gas, with tires that could blow at any moment. Every day was a gamble. Breakdowns were constant. A cracked axle, a busted radiator. A flat tire any of these could spell disaster. There were no convenient service stations every few miles. Repairs were often done on the side of the road with scavenged parts and sheer ingenuity. And the human cost was even greater. They slept in makeshift camps by the side of the road, often called Hoovervilles, in a bitter jab at the president they blamed for their plight. Water was scarce. Food was scarcer. They faced suspicion and hostility from the residents of the towns they passed through. Te wera kaledokis, a term that became a slur, synonymous with poverty and ignorance, regardless of whether they were actually from Oklahoma. They were seen as invaders, a drain on already scarce resources. Yet, in these grim roadside communities, a powerful sense of community and mutual support often emerged. A family with a little extra food would share with one that had none. Someone who knew how to fix an engine would help a stranger without asking for anything in return. Stories were shared around campfires. Songs were sung. And for a few brief moments, the crushing weight of their journey would lift. These were moments of shared humanity in the face of overwhelming This image, with its dusty, melancholy atmosphere, captures the end of one of those long, hard days on the Mother Road. The setting sun doesn't just signal the end of the day. It feels like the end of an era. It's a farewell to a way of life that has vanished. The long shadows stretching across the road are like ghosts of the past, reaching out to them. The silence is probably profound, broken only by the sputtering of the engine and the sigh of the wind. It's a scene steeped in melancholy, a deep sadness for what's been lost. But it's crucial to see that it's not a picture of pure despair. There is an incredible strength here. The fact that this car is still moving forward, that this family is still together, that they are pushing on toward the sunset and an unknown future, that is an act of profound courage. It's the human spirit refusing to be broken. They have lost their homes, their farms, their communities, but they have not lost their will to endure. This aesthetic, this grapes of wrath feeling, has become a cornerstone of American identity. It reminds us of a time when the nation was brought to its knees, and how ordinary people faced unimaginable hardship with dignity and fortitude. It's a story about the fragility of prosperity and the enduring power of family and hope. It's a reminder that the American dream, for many, wasn't about getting rich quick, but about the simple, desperate desire to work, to provide for one's family, and to find a place to call home. When we look at this scene, we're not just looking at a historical event, we're looking at a timeless human story. The specifics change. The car might be a boat, the dusty road, a vast ocean. The destination a different country, but the core elements remain the same. Displacement, struggle, and the relentless search for a better life. It's a story that continues to play out all over the world today. So the next time you see an old, black and white photos of a family on the road, take a moment, look past the dust and the poverty. See the strength in their eyes, the resilience in their posture. Hear the rumble of the overloaded engine. Feel the heat of the setting sun on your face. You're witnessing a testament to the incredible, unbreakable strength of the human heart on its long journey west, chasing the last light of day. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more deep dives into the images that define our history. Let me know in the comments what this image makes you feel. See you next time. In the heart of the 1930s, America was gasping for air. A great, dark shadow was creeping across the plains, a relentless monster of dust and despair. This was the Dust Bowl, a man-made environmental catastrophe that brought a nation already on its knees from the Great Depression to the brink of utter collapse. But in the darkest hour, a voice of hope and reason echoed from radios across the country, a voice that belonged to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He didn't just offer words of comfort. He offered a plan, a revolution in how America treated its most precious resource, the land itself. This is the story of how one president, armed with science and a deep love for his country, fought back against the black blizzards and saved the American heartland. Before we dive into Roosevelt's groundbreaking solutions, we need to understand the sheer terror of the Dust Bowl. Imagine waking up to a sky turned black at midday, not cloudy, but black with millions of tons of topsoil, stripped from the land and whipped into monstrous, rolling clouds. These weren't just dust storms. They were black blizzards that could blot out the sun for days, burying homes, fences, and entire farms under a thick blanket of dirt. The air was so thick with dust that people had to shovel it out of their houses like snow. Children wore masks to walk to school, and a new, deadly illness called dust pneumonia claimed lives, especially among the young and the elderly. So, how did this nightmare begin? It was a perfect storm of factors. For decades, farmers on the Great Plains had been encouraged to plow up every inch of native grassland. The tough, deep-rooted grasses that had held the soil in place for centuries were ripped out to plant wheat. This worked for a while, especially during wet years. But then came the drought. A severe, prolonged drought hit the region in the early 1930s. The rains stopped, the crops failed, and the fields were left bare. The once rich topsoil, now loose and unprotected, was at the mercy of the relentless prairie winds. The land itself began to blow away. The very foundation of life in the heartland was turning to dust and vanishing on the wind. This was the crisis that landed on Franklin Roosevelt's desk when he took office in 1933. He knew that economic recovery and environmental recovery had to go hand in hand. You couldn't fix one without fixing the other. Roosevelt, a New Yorker, might have seemed an unlikely champion for the plains, but he was a passionate conservationist. He had a deep personal connection to the land. Having managed his own forested estate at Hyde Park, he saw the Dust Bowl not just as a farming problem, but as a national crisis that threatened the country's food supply and its very spirit. He believed the federal government had a crucial role to play, not just in providing relief, but in teaching and enabling a new way of farming. One of his first and most visionary steps was the creation of the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, in 1933. This program put millions of young, unemployed men to work on conservation projects across the country. In the Dust Bowl region, the Tree Army, as they were called, embarked on a monumental task: the Great Plains Shelter Belt Project. Their mission was to plant a massive wall of trees, over 200 million of them, stretching from Canada down to Texas. These weren't just random plantings. They were strategically placed rows of trees designed to act as windbreaks, to slow the wind, trap moisture, and hold the soil in place. It was a simple, elegant idea, using nature to heal nature. The CCC boys planted trees, built dams, and worked to restore the wounded landscape, tree by patient tree. But trees alone weren't enough. Roosevelt understood that the problem was systemic. It was about how America farmed. In 1935, he pushed for the creation of a brand new federal agency, the Soil Conservation Service, or SCS. At its head, he placed a man named Hugh Hammond Bennett, a charismatic soil scientist who had become known as the father of soil conservation. Bennett was a true evangelist for the land. He knew that you couldn't just tell farmers what to do, you had to show them. He believed in a science-based approach, tailored to the specific needs of each piece of land. Under Bennett's leadership, the SCs set up demonstration projects all across the Dust Bowl states. They worked directly with farmers, teaching them revolutionary new techniques. Instead of plowing in straight lines, which created channels for wind and water to carry away soil, they promoted contour plowing along the natural curves of the land. They introduced terracing on the steepest slopes, creating step-like formations that held rainwater and prevented runoff. They also encouraged farmers to practice strip cropping, planting alternating bands of different crops, like wheat and sorghum, to create a natural barrier against the wind. It was a whole new philosophy of farming in harmony with the land, not against it. To get farmers on board, the government offered incentives. The Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act of 1936 paid farmers to use these new soil-conserving methods. They were financially rewarded for letting certain fields lie fallow to recover, for planting soil-holding grasses instead of cash crops, and for rotating their crops to restore nutrients to the soil. It was a brilliant strategy. It provided desperate farmers with a much-needed source of income while simultaneously healing the land. The government was essentially paying farmers to become stewards of the soil. This transformed the relationship between the government and the farmer from one of simple subsidy to one of partnership in national conservation. The change wasn't just happening on the ground. It was happening in the minds of the people. Through the SCS, a massive educational campaign was launched. Agents traveled from farm to farm. Pamphlets, films, and radio programs spread the gospel of conservation. Hugh Hammond Bennett was a master of public relations. In a now famous moment, while testifying before Congress, he timed his speech to coincide with a dust storm that was blowing into Washington, D.C. from the plains. As the sky darkened and dust began to filter into the Capitol building, he dramatically pointed to the window and said, "Gentlemen, there goes Oklahoma." Congress passed his bill. Slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. The combination of the CCC's tree planting, the SCS's scientific farming techniques, and the return of the rains in the late 1930s started to heal the land. The black blizzards became less frequent and less severe. Green shoots of grass began to poke through the barren earth. The dust settled. Roosevelt's New Deal for the land had worked. He had faced an unprecedented environmental disaster and met it with unprecedented government action. He proved that human ingenuity and respect for nature could reverse the damage that human ignorance had caused. The legacy of Roosevelt's fight against the Dust Bowl is all around us today. The Soil Conservation Service, now called the Natural Resources Conservation Service, continues to work with farmers and landowners across the nation. The principles of contour plowing, terracing, and windbreaks are now standard practice in modern agriculture. The Dust Bowl taught America a harsh but vital lesson: that our prosperity is tied directly to the health of our soil and water. Have you ever heard of a war fought not with guns, but with shovels and saplings? It's a story of human determination against the raw power of nature, a battle to heal the very land we live on. Imagine this: the 1930s. America is in the grip of the Great Depression, but on the Great Plains, a different kind of crisis is unfolding. Years of unsustainable farming practices, coupled with a severe drought, have stripped the land of its protective prairie grasses. The soil, once rich and fertile, is now loose, dry dust. And then the winds came. They whipped across the plains, picking up the topsoil and creating monstrous, rolling clouds of dust that blotted out the sun. They called it the Dust Bowl. These weren't just dust storms. They were black blizzards that buried homes, destroyed farms, and choked livestock. The American dream had turned into a dusty nightmare. It was a man-made ecological disaster on a scale never seen before. The situation looked hopeless. How could anyone possibly stop the wind? How could you reclaim millions of acres of land that had turned to desert? From Washington, D.C., President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration saw the catastrophe unfolding. They knew that charity and relief payments weren't enough. They needed a bold, audacious solution. In 1934, the idea for the Great Plains Shelter Belt Project was born. The plan was monumental in its scope: to plant a 100-mile-wide belt of trees, stretching over 1,800 miles from the Canadian border, all the way down to the Brazos River in Texas. Goal: to create a massive, living wall of trees that would act as a windbreak, slowing the relentless winds, anchoring the precious soil, and conserving moisture. Skeptics called it FDR's folly. They said it was impossible, that trees could never survive in the harsh, arid conditions of the plains. The scale was mind-boggling. We're talking about planting over 220 million trees. But desperation breeds determination. The project was launched as part of the New Deal, giving jobs to thousands of unemployed men through the Works Progress Administration, or WPA. These weren't professional foresters. They were farmers, laborers, and young men from the Civilian Conservation Corps. They were ordinary people tasked with an extraordinary mission. The work was grueling. Under the scorching sun, amidst the swirling dust, thousands of men fanned out across the plains. Their tools were simple: shovels, plows, and their own bare hands. They dug endless furrows, row after row, preparing the earth for a new kind of crop. Trees. It was a logistical masterpiece. Nurseries were established to cultivate millions of sapling species, carefully chosen for their resilience, like green ash, hackberry, red cedar, and ponderosa pine. These weren't just any trees. They had to be tough enough to withstand drought, extreme temperatures, and the constant prairie wind. Day after day, the planting continued. Trucks loaded with young trees would arrive at a designated plot of land. Teams of men would quickly unload them, placing the saplings into the prepared furrows, carefully covering their roots with soil, and giving them their first precious drink of water. They worked with a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose. For many, this wasn't just a job. It was a fight for their homes, their future, and the future of the land itself. Imagine the sight. Thousands of men, their faces caked with dust, working in unison across a vast, desolate landscape. They were planting lines of hope in the middle of despair. These weren't just random plantings. The shelter belts were scientifically designed. Each belt consisted of multiple rows of trees and shrubs of varying heights, creating a permeable barrier that would lift the wind up and over the fields, rather than just blocking it. This design was crucial for reducing wind speed for a significant distance on the leeward side of the belt. The first few years were a struggle. The drought persisted, and many of the newly planted saplings withered and died. The critics felt vindicated, but the planters didn't give up. They improved their techniques, learning how to better conserve water and protect the young trees. They built fences to keep grazing cattle from destroying their work. It was a constant battle of trial and error. And then, slowly, miraculously, things began to change. As the trees took root and began to grow, a transformation occurred. You could see it happening. The first sign was the soil. Around the base of the young trees, the dust began to settle. The roots of the saplings started to bind the loose earth, creating a network of stability beneath the surface. As the shelter belts grew taller, their effect became more pronounced. The fierce winds that had once scoured the land were now forced to slow down. Their destructive power diminished. The air began to clear. In the lee of the trees, the soil held more moisture. Snow, instead of being blown away, would pile up within the shelter belts, melting in the spring and providing a vital source of water for the surrounding fields. The visual change was astonishing. What was once a monochrome landscape of brown and gray began to show patches of green. The lines of trees grew into lush, green ribbons stretching across the plains. The contrast was stark. Outside the shelter belts, the dust might still be blowing, but inside, the land was calm and protected. This wasn't just about stopping the wind. The trees created new light. They provided shade, reducing evaporation and cooling the air. Wildlife, which had fled the barren plains, began to return. Birds nested in the branches, their songs replacing the howl of the wind. The shelter belts became oases of life in a recovering desert. For the farmers, the change was life-altering. Behind the protection of the trees, they could once again plant crops with confidence. Yields began to increase. The land was becoming productive again. The shelter belts not only saved their soil, but they also saved their farms and their communities. The very fabric of life on the Great Plains was being rewoven. By the time the project officially ended in 1942, over 18,000 miles of shelter belts had been planted. It was a success beyond anyone's wildest dreams. FDR's folly had become one of America's greatest conservation triumphs. Today, many of these original shelter belts still stand, silent, leafy monuments to the generation that planted them. They're a living legacy of what can be achieved when human ingenuity and collective will are pitted against an environmental crisis. They are a powerful reminder that we are not just inhabitants of our environment, but its custodians. The story of the Great Plains shelter belt teaches us a vital lesson. It shows that even in the face of overwhelming ecological disaster, positive change is possible. It proves that through large-scale, coordinated action, we can heal a wounded planet. It's a story of resilience, not just of the trees, but of the human spirit. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the best way to fight for our future is to simply plant a tree. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about how we can change our world. See you next time. Have you ever flown over the American Midwest and seen those giant, perfect circles dotting the landscape? They look like something out of a science fiction movie. These massive green discs etched into the earth. But what you're actually seeing is the heart of American agriculture. A story of ingenuity, struggle, and incredible transformation. This isn't just about farming, it's about how we feed a nation, and it's a story that has evolved more dramatically than you could ever imagine. Let's rewind the clock. Picture the 1930s, the Dust Bowl. The images from that era are stark and grainy, almost like a different world. You see families squinting into the sun, their faces etched with worry. The land is parched, cracked, and unforgiving. Dust storms, the infamous black blizzards, roll across the plains, swallowing homes and hopes whole. For these farmers, life was a constant battle against the elements. They worked with their hands, with simple plows pulled by horses or early, sputtering tractors. Water was a prayer, rain a miracle. Survival was the only goal, and it was never guaranteed. The dream was simple: to have enough rain to see the next season through. Now, let's fast forward. Watch as that grainy, black and white world dissolves and sharpens into breathtaking, ultra-high definition color. From the sky, we see it. The landscape is a vibrant tapestry of greens and golds. Those circles bear center pivot irrigation systems, some stretching half a mile long. These aren't just sprinklers. They are technological marvels, moving slowly, deliberately, delivering precisely the right amount of water to every single plant. This is the modern Midwest farm. Instead of a handful of acres, today's farms can span thousands, even tens of thousands of acres. A single farmer, with the help of technology, can manage an area that would have required a whole community of farmers a century ago. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Down on the ground, the change is just as staggering. Gone are the simple plows. In their place are behemoths of machinery, combines and tractors that look like they belong on another planet. These machines are guided by GPS with pinpoint accuracy, down to the inch. They drive themselves, planting seeds at the perfect depth and spacing. Sensors in the soil monitor moisture and nutrient levels in real time, sending data back to a computer. Drones buzz overhead, not just for stunning video shots, but as agricultural tools. They use multispectral cameras to scan the fields, identifying areas that might have pests, disease, or need a little extra fertilizer. They can even target spray-specific problem spots, reducing the overall use of chemicals. Inside the cab of a modern combine, it looks more like a spaceship cockpit than a tractor. Multiple screens display live data streams, yield per acre, grain moisture content, engine performance, and a satellite map showing exactly where the machine is and where it's been. The farmer isn't just driving. They're a data analyst, a fleet manager, and a logistics expert, all from the comfort of an air-conditioned seat. They can monitor their irrigation systems, check commodity prices, and even sell their grain, all from a tablet or smartphone. This technological revolution is all about efficiency. It's about getting more crop from every acre, using less water, less fuel, and fewer resources. It's a high-stakes, high-tech operation where data science is as important as knowing when to plant. This isn't your grandfather's farm. It's a sophisticated, data-driven business. But with all this progress, you might wonder if something has been lost. The image of the family farm, the deep connection to the land passed down through generations, does that still exist? The answer is yes, absolutely. Behind all the technology, behind the drones and the GPS, you will still find the heart of the American farmer. Many of these massive operations are still family-run. The last name on the mailbox is often the same one that has been there for 100 years. The person analyzing data in that high-tech cab is likely the great-grandchild of the farmer who tilled the same land with a team of horses. The values haven't changed. A deep respect for the soil, an incredible work ethic, and an unwavering commitment to feeding others. They still wake up before the sun and work until long after it sets, especially during planting and harvest. They still worry about the weather. A sudden hailstorm or a late frost can still be devastating. They feel the weight of responsibility, not just to their own families, but to all of us who depend on the food they grow. They are stewards of the land, constantly innovating not just for profit, but to ensure this land can continue to provide for generations to come. Think about it. The corn in your cereal, the soybeans that feed the livestock, the wheat for your bread, so much of it begins right here, in TC-bust circular fields. It is easy to take for granted when we see it neatly packaged on a grocery store shelf. But it all starts with a seed, a patch of earth, and a farmer. So the next time you see those giant circles from a plane, or drive past an endless field of corn, take a moment. Remember the journey. From the dusty, desperate days of the 1930s to the incredible technological ballet of today. It's a story of human resilience, of innovation born from necessity. It's the story of the American heartland, which has changed in almost every way, yet at its core remains the same. It's the enduring spirit of the farmer, looking out over their fields, a blend of tradition and technology, forever tied to the land, working to feed the world. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through time as fascinating as I did, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories like this one. We'll see you in the next one.